What if I told you that having sex with the wrong person 40,000 years ago could doom an entire species? I'm about to reveal how scientists cracked the genetic code of humanity's most tragic love story, one that ended with the complete extinction of our closest relatives. Here's the shocking discovery. In 2023, researchers analyzing Neanderthal DNA from Spanish caves found something that changed everything we thought we knew about extinction. These weren't random bones, they were entire families. Fathers, mothers, children, cousins, and their genes revealed a secret that's been buried for 40,000 years. For 300,000 years, these incredible beings, stronger than us, bigger brains, master survivors, dominated Ice Age Europe. They should have inherited the Earth. Instead, their own mating choices became the very trap that killed them all. The evidence is devastating. Inbreeding so severe it left genetic signatures we can read like a death certificate. Population bottlenecks so tight they couldn't recover. To understand Neanderthal relationships, we have to start with something that might seem trivial. Finger measurements, specifically, the ratio between their index and ring fingers, what scientists call the 2D4D ratio. This ratio reflects testosterone exposure in the womb and correlates with mating strategies across species. High testosterone exposure, indicated by a longer ring finger relative to the index finger, typically indicates more polygamous, competitive mating behaviors. Neanderthal finger ratios suggest they leaned more toward polygamy than modern humans. But here's where it gets interesting. The pattern wasn't consistent across all populations or time periods. This suggests their mating strategies were flexible, adapting to environmental pressures during harsh ice ages. When groups were small and resources scarce, they appeared to have formed more monogamous pair bonds. During warmer periods, when populations could grow larger, some individuals, likely the strongest males, may have had multiple partners. Think of it like this. When survival was marginal, every adult needed to be maximally invested in raising offspring. But when times were good, social hierarchies could develop that allowed some individuals to monopolize mating opportunities. But wait, there's more. In 2019, researchers made a startling discovery in ancient dental plaque. They found traces of Methanobrevibacter oralis, a mouth bacteria that's primarily transmitted through intimate contact, specifically kissing. This tiny microbe survived in Neanderthal mouths for thousands of years, suggesting that intimate behaviors like kissing were part of their social repertoire. It's a remarkably human behavior that speaks to emotional bonds beyond mere reproductive necessity. Archaeological evidence supports this emotional complexity. At multiple sites, we find adult pairs buried together, sometimes with their hands positioned as if they died holding each other. The famous Sungir burials show elaborate grave goods suggesting deep emotional investment in individual relationships. What emerges is a picture of beings whose capacity for love, intimacy, and complex social bonds rivaled our own. But, as we'll see, the very social structures that made them successful for hundreds of thousands of years would ultimately become their undoing. Here's where the Neanderthal love story takes a dark turn. Recent genetic analysis reveals that despite their success, Neanderthal populations were always walking a demographic tightrope. The total Neanderthal population across all of Europe and Western Asia likely never exceeded 70,000 individuals, roughly the size of a small modern city, spread across an area the size of the continental United States. This created what population geneticists call a genetic bottleneck, small populations where everyone is more closely related than in larger groups. And small populations are incredibly vulnerable to what mathematicians call demographic stochasticity, basically the random ups and downs of birth and death rates. Computer models reveal just how precarious this was. If Neanderthal women under 20 experienced just a 2.7% decrease in fertility, perhaps due to climate stress, disease, or resource scarcity, the entire population could collapse within 10,000 years. Drop that fertility rate by 8%, and we're talking extinction in 4,000 years. These aren't massive changes. They're the kind of subtle shifts that could result from slightly harsher winters, marginally less available food, or increased infant mortality. The El Sidrón cave in Spain provides a haunting example. Genetic analysis of the 13 individuals found there reveals they were all closely related, possibly an extended family group, but their DNA also shows signs of inbreeding, with some individuals sharing identical genetic markers that indicate their parents were closely related. This wasn't unusual. Similar patterns appear at sites across Europe. Like people living on remote islands today, Neanderthals often had limited options for finding genetically diverse mates. Each generation became slightly less genetically diverse than the last. While this didn't immediately threaten their survival, inbreeding can persist for many generations without obvious problems. It reduced their population's ability to adapt to changing conditions. They were becoming evolutionarily fragile just as their world was about to change dramatically. Despite their demographic challenges, Neanderthals developed sophisticated strategies for raising the next generation. Strategies that reveal both their intelligence and the seeds of their vulnerability. Neanderthal babies were born with brains that were already 75% the size of adult brains, compared to modern humans, whose babies are born with brains only 25% of adult size. This meant Neanderthal infants were more developed at birth but required enormous energy investment from mothers. A pregnant or nursing Neanderthal woman needed approximately 4,000 to 5,000 calories per day, equivalent to what modern endurance athletes consume, in an environment where every calorie had to be hunted or gathered. This represented a massive community investment. Evidence suggests they developed cooperative breeding strategies to handle this challenge. Analysis of campsites shows that children, adults, and elderly individuals all contributed to different aspects of group survival, suggesting extended family networks helped raise children. Isotope analysis of children's bones reveals they were weaned later than modern human children, sometimes not until age 4 or 5. This extended nursing period provided crucial nutrition, but also meant mothers were reproductively unavailable for longer periods. While modern hunter-gatherer women typically have children every 3 to 4 years, Neanderthal women may have had reproductive intervals of 5 to 6 years. In a population already struggling with small numbers, this slower reproductive rate created additional demographic pressure, but they compensated with remarkable parental investment. Evidence from sites like Kafse and School suggests that fathers and male relatives were heavily involved in childcare. Unusual among great apes, but common in humans with high parental investment strategies. The fossil record shows children with healed fractures and injuries that would have required months of care to survive. Someone was investing enormous time and energy in keeping injured children alive. Evidence of deep emotional bonds and long-term thinking about family investment. This intensive parenting strategy worked for hundreds of thousands of years, until it didn't. Here's where Neanderthal love lives get really interesting from an evolutionary perspective. Unlike our closest primate relatives, Neanderthal males lacked certain anatomical features that tell us a lot about their mating strategies. Specifically, they didn't have penile spines, small, backward-pointing structures found on the penises of many mammals, including chimpanzees. These spines serve a specific function. They help remove sperm from previous males during mating, indicating intense sperm competition and promiscuous mating systems. The absence of these structures in both Neanderthals and modern humans suggests our lineages evolved away from highly promiscuous mating systems sometime around 800,000 years ago. This anatomical evidence points toward more pair-bonded, less competitively promiscuous relationships. Sexual dimorphism, size differences between males and females, also provides clues. Male Neanderthals were typically 15–20% larger than females, compared to 50 to 100% size differences in highly polygamous species like gorillas. This moderate dimorphism suggests a mating system somewhere between strict monogamy and extreme polygamy, exactly what we'd expect from the flexible strategies indicated by their finger ratios. Hormonal analysis of bone chemistry suggests Neanderthal women had different testosterone to estrogen ratios than modern women, which may have influenced both their physical strength and their social behaviors around mating and competition. What emerges is a picture of a species with the anatomical and physiological capacity for long-term pair bonds, but the behavioral flexibility to adapt their mating strategies to environmental conditions. In small groups during harsh times, monogamous pair bonds maximize offspring survival. In larger groups during better times, some polygamous arrangements may have emerged. This flexibility was both their strength and ultimately their weakness. Around 40,000 years ago, everything that had made Neanderthals successful for hundreds of thousands of years suddenly worked against them. It was the perfect storm of demographic, environmental, and competitive pressures. First, climate became incredibly unstable. Within just a few thousand years, Europe experienced some of the most dramatic temperature swings in recent geological history. Ice sheets advanced and retreated rapidly, fragmenting habitats and making the large game Neanderthals specialized in hunting increasingly unpredictable. Second, modern humans arrived in Europe in significant numbers for the first time. These weren't just competitors. Genetic evidence confirms they were potential mates. DNA analysis shows that interbreeding occurred, but the dynamics were complex. Computer models suggest that while interbreeding happened, it wasn't enough to maintain Neanderthal genetic identity. Small Neanderthal populations were essentially absorbed into the larger modern human gene pool over thousands of years. Here's where their reproductive strategies became fatal. Remember those demographic models showing how vulnerable small populations are to fertility decreases, climate instability, habitat fragmentation, and competition for resources likely triggered exactly these kinds of subtle fertility declines. As populations shrank, finding genetically diverse mates became even harder. Inbreeding increased, reducing fitness and fertility further. Groups became too small to maintain their sophisticated cultural knowledge. Tool-making techniques, hunting strategies, medicinal knowledge all began to disappear. Meanwhile, modern humans maintained larger, more connected populations that could weather these demographic storms. Their reproductive strategies, while perhaps less intensive in terms of parental investment, were more demographically robust. The last known Neanderthal populations survived in refugia, like Gibraltar and the Caucasus, until about 28,000 years ago. Small, isolated groups clinging to existence in increasingly marginal environments. They didn't go extinct because they were inferior. They went extinct because their successful reproductive strategies, small groups, intensive parenting, flexible but limited mating systems, couldn't scale up to survive a perfect storm of environmental and competitive pressures. The Neanderthal story isn't really about extinction. It's about the complexity of love, family, and survival in impossible circumstances. For over 300,000 years, they created successful societies based on deep emotional bonds, intensive parenting, and flexible social structures. Their love lives were remarkably sophisticated, evidence of kissing, pair bonding, cooperative child rearing, and flexible mating strategies that adapted to environmental conditions. They were, in many ways, more emotionally and socially complex than we've given them credit for. But evolution doesn't reward complexity. It rewards survival and reproduction. When conditions changed rapidly, the very social structures that had made them successful became demographic traps. Their legacy lives on in our DNA. Up to 4% of the genome in people of European and Asian descent. Every time we form deep pair bonds, invest heavily in our children, or adapt our family structures to environmental challenges, we're echoing strategies perfected by Neanderthals. Perhaps the most profound lesson from Neanderthal love lives is that there's no single right way to structure families and relationships. What works depends entirely on context, environment, and the challenges your population faces. In the end, the Neanderthals didn't fail at love, they succeeded too well at it. In a world that was changing too fast for their successful strategies to adapt.